and I think the most important thing to talk about, obviously, is the issue of the kidnapped. Hamas kidnapped 240 people, most of them Israeli civilians, to Gaza, kids and babies and women and senior citizens. Many of the kidnapped are foreign nationalities. Obviously, the international community, the world, they're all shocked by that. It's totally unacceptable. There is a demand for the immediate release of the kidnapped. The issue is that, again, for Hamas, and we are talking about a very viciously mindset-guided organization. The kidnapped are Hamas, one of Hamas' last cards to play with. And it's very obvious that Hamas will try to exhaust this card as much as possible, and particularly now when the pressure on Hamas is, military pressure on Hamas is increasing in Gaza Strip. Right now, when Israel accomplished this circlement of Gaza City, Hamas' dilemma vis-a-vis the whole issue of the kidnapped is going to deepen, because on the one hand, Israel says to Hamas, and it's backed by the international community in the United States, up until now, there will be no ceasefire before the kidnapped are going to be are released. And on the other hand, Hamas needs to try to exhaust, and if Hamas fails to comply with that, the Israeli military pressure is increasing every moment. And on the other hand, Hamas, only one of the fewest last cards Hamas has in its possession is the issue of the kidnapped. So I think that unfortunately we'll continue to see this vicious game going on, with all the attempts of to broker some kind of a deal. In that sense, there has been something that has been recently, for the last really 2-3 days, percolating into the discussion, and this is, some people are talking about a possible complicated scenario where actually it ends up with something that we saw, something similar to what we saw in 1982, when Israel invaded Lebanon to end the terror attacks of the Palestinians organizations who were based in South Lebanon. Back then in 1982, in the summer of 1982, the Israeli military move ended up with the deportation of all the militants, these Palestinian militants and their leadership, including Yasser Arafat, who were based back then in Lebanon. They all basically left Lebanon on a ship. They left Lebanon, they were deported. Most of them went to Tunisia and some other place in the Arab world. And in the last couple of days, there have been some kind of talks here, basically saying maybe we'll see the repeat of that scenario, meaning that as part of a complex deal with Hamas leaders, as part of the context of the story of the hostages, of the kidnapped, there will be some sort of a deal where Hamas leaders will be allowed to leave Gaza Strip, to go elsewhere in the Arab world, wherever, and the kidnapped will be released. I don't know to say how viable this scenario is. There are differences between the story of Hamas today in 2023 in Gaza Strip and the story of the Palestinians in Lebanon in 1982. The Palestinians in Lebanon in 1982 were basically guests in Lebanon. They were not indigenous. They were not. So it's a totally story. Hamas leadership are from Gaza Strip, those who are in Gaza Strip. And of course, there are those who are not staying in Gaza Strip. And also in the sense of the mindset of the leaders of Hamas, particularly those based in Gaza Strip, like Sinwar and Def and others. It seems to me like they are kind of guided more by this mindset of Samson choice, sort of speaking. If I'm going down, everybody's going down with me. It's a kind of determinist outlook. I don't know to say if I can see Sinwar or Def or others of Hamas leaders in Gaza Strip who are based there. I don't see to say that they are going to leave Gaza Strip because I don't really think that this is their mindset. And So I don't know to assess at this point what's the viability of such a scenario. And then we also have to remember that Israel, formal objective of this war is to end and topple down Hamas rule over Gaza Strip, and it's also the United States' formal objective.